There's more controversy over a move by Ontario's Conservative government to remove some bike lanes from city streets. Now the province is proposing to give itself legal protection against any lawsuits if cyclists are hurt or killed after a bike lane is taken out. The CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick has the details.
Yeah, there's been a few phases to the controversy around Bill 212. That's the bill we're talking about. When the government first introduced it, it was aimed at requiring municipalities to get permission from the province to install any new bike lanes that would result in a lane of traffic being taken away for cars. Then the government added some proposed regulations that were aimed at giving themselves the power to remove existing bike lanes. This would apply across the province, but really those measures were aimed at 3 specific bike lanes here in the city of Toronto on Bloor Street, University Avenue, and Yonge Street. The government's always argued that this is about reducing gridlock in Ontario's cities. Critics, though, have said that taking bike lanes away will actually make congestion worse because it'll put more people in cars to get where they need to go. Critics have also said this is a massive overreach by the province into municipal affairs. So there's already been controversy around it. And now the latest phase is that at committee yesterday, where the bill was being studied, the government put forward a number of amendments. And one of them is giving legal protection to the government to protect itself, giving it immunity essentially from any legal action by a cyclist who gets injured or relatives of a cyclist who get killed on a road where a bike lane has been taken away. The opposition MPPs on the committee tried to fight this. NDP MPP Jessica Bell said this makes an anti-bike bill even worse. Here's what she said.
Conservatives want to wash their hands from the blood that will be spilled. It will be spilled when these bike lanes are removed. That's what that amendment tells me.
Opposition MPPs questioning why this is a last-minute addition, amendment to the bill. Why wasn't it in the bill originally? They're also questioning and criticizing the government for the millions of dollars it's willing to spend to take out bike lanes in the city of Toronto. Liberal MPP Mary Margaret McMahon saying taxpayers across the province should be upset about this. Take a listen.
So people in Brampton, in Burlington, in Bancroft, they want to pay? They honestly, those residents want to pay using their tax dollars to rip out Toronto bike lanes? No way, no way. It's fiscally irresponsible.
And the opposition MPPs tried to fight the amendments, but the Progressive Conservatives have a majority on the committee. They have a majority here at Queen's Park, Andrew. So this bill will get passed in the coming weeks. The critics are saying they're going to try and fight it. There was another rally here at Queen's Park last night by advocates for cyclists. They delivered 2 ghost bikes, they're called, to represent cyclists who have been killed on Toronto streets this year. And there have been cyclists killed elsewhere in the province as well. But again, they've got an uphill battle to try and fight this legislation, which the government, by the way, is fast-tracking.
6 people killed on bikes so far this year in Toronto. What is the government saying to justify this move?
On the move about the legal immunity specifically, they're not saying much. Transportation Minister Pradmeet Sarkaria was questioned by reporters yesterday after the committee meeting, asked about the amendment, what the government's trying to do with it, if it's an admission that people might end up getting injured or killed because of removing bike lanes. And Sarkaria did not specifically address questions about this legal protection. He just kept making the case for why the government's doing this in the first place. Again, mentioning the gridlock issue and saying the government's position is that these bike lanes should never have been put on main streets in Toronto. Again, they're focused on Toronto in the first place, and that they belong on secondary streets. That is what Premier Doug Ford reiterated when he was asked questions today about the legal immunity. He didn't acknowledge those questions or answer them directly either, but continued to make the case for this policy. Here's what he said.
We're going to work with the mayor in the city, and we're going to get traffic moving, but I want to make sure that the bikers are safe. I've always believed that you don't put them on main arterial roads, you put them on secondary roads, so you don't jam up the main roads.
He mentioned the mayor there. He's referring to Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow, who's an avid cyclist herself. Today, she was asked for reaction to this latest move. Andrew, she's talked about how she herself has been doored while riding her bike on Bloor before there was a bike lane put in place. She's not happy about what the government's doing, but she said today she's going to try and keep working with the province to try and find some kind of compromise and try and find some common ground.
The CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick in Toronto. For more on this, I want to bring in Peter Grafe. He's an associate professor of political science at McMaster University, and he's joining us today from Ottawa. And Peter, thanks for taking the time to talk to us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So what do you make of this latest bit in this controversy, and if you want to call it that, a lot of people would say it is, in terms of the bike lane law, where the government is trying to protect itself from potential lawsuits from cyclists that are injured or killed in riding on a road that used to have a bike lane, where a bike lane is going to be ripped up?
Yeah, I think they don't want to pay any kind of price for this bill ultimately, and so, the potential cost both of the litigation, but also of being shown in a court to be at blame or at fault for a cyclist being killed as a result of this decision is something the government doesn't want following them, and so this is a way for them, at the expense of people's rights in terms of being able to use the courts to sue in these situations. By taking that away, they protect themselves from future costs.
And do you think, I know you're not, I don't think you're a lawyer, but just politically, is your understanding, can the government do this? Can they kind of implement something like this that shields them preemptively from a potential lawsuit?
Yeah, I mean, there's limits to that, but yeah, there's many ways in which they can limit access to the courts around, particular forms. I mean, we see it around, say, auto insurance and so on in different provinces, ways you kind of limit access to the ability to sue. Generally our protection as citizens is that we are very critical of governments that would take away those rights. And so it really depends on us as citizens, regardless of our view on these bike lanes, to, raise questions about governments that are trying to limit our access to use the remedies of the courts to challenge, outcomes that have been produced in parts by decisions in public policy.
Politically, what do you think is going on here? Is this a way to get us talking about bike lanes instead of talking about things that the Conservatives would rather people not talk about?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you've got to remember that for a lot of people, especially in the Greater Toronto area, they waste a lot of their lives sitting in traffic. I mean, this is a real loss in quality of life for many people in the area. And so a politician who can claim to have an answer to that problem, since the idea that it's all the problem of bike lanes and is taking actions to solve them, is probably going to be well seen by many residents, even if the solution probably isn't going to make any impact on that outcome, because there's many other issues of just too many cars on the streets to be able to, and too poor quality alternatives in terms of public transportation for these bike lane changes to really make any difference. But it's a government that looks to be responding to the real problems that face a lot of people in the Toronto area, and to the extent that they can be seen to be fighting against urban elites who are trying to save these bike lanes, or these who seem a bit kind of culturally foreign to people who need to drive to work, need to drive to school, and so forth. All plays in the hands of the government to be responding to their core elections.
Do you think there's a potential for it to backfire politically, in the sense that some people would say this is overreach? This is a provincial government that is getting involved in municipal affairs. There's a democratically elected mayor and council that put in these bike lanes. Now the province is interfering with that process, and now if you listen to some opposition legislators, they will say this is the government trying to wash their hands of the blood that will be spilled because cyclists will be killed or will be injured.
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument about the blood of cyclists and so on is really playing the government's game. It's making it the issue about the bike lanes, as opposed to the argument being ultimately, why does the Premier of Ontario really just want to be the Mayor of Toronto? I don't think that plays well for, in many parts of the province that aren't Toronto. Similarly, if the Premier of the province is spending all this time worrying about bike lanes on Bloor Street, he's not spending his time solving the problems in the emergency rooms of this province, or of the decline in the post-secondary sector, or of issues of the quality of primary instruction in this province. So, yeah, I think there's a cost that could be paid if people come to see it as a government that's not really paying attention to the things it has under its control, and that it's a premier who doesn't really govern for all of Ontarians, but really just for the people in the outskirts of Toronto. But to date, the opposition, I don't think, has really been that successful in making it about a government that doesn't have its priorities straight, or that's spending its time on things that aren't that important. They've really, I think, fallen into the trap of having an argument about bike lanes, which will win them support in areas where the opposition already has support, but will reinforce the power of Doug Ford, I think, in areas where he has support, as people will rally around him, seeing him as someone who's actually responding to their concerns about the time they spend in their cars, even if the bike lanes won't really make any difference to congestion in the Greater Toronto Area.
Do you think this is an indication that there could be an election much earlier than scheduled? It's scheduled for the end of next year at the latest, but do you think this is a sign that Ontarians will be likely going to an election sooner rather than later?
Well, it's certainly a sign that the Premier is trying to make sure that he's connected to his base, and that he's rallying his base around a number of cultural issues that are important to his re-election chances. So yeah, he's either looking to an election, or he's looking at some polling which shows himself, for instance, less popular than his party, or the fact that the majority of Ontarians, even in the last election, wanted a change of government but couldn't decide between the parties. He may be looking at those kinds of signals too, and recognizing the necessity to strengthen his appeal and strengthen his connection with his core electoral constituencies, who aren't getting easier commutes, who are asking questions about hospitals and schools. And so is there a way that he can show himself as their champion again?
You think it'll work?
Yeah, I think it's quite possible. I mean, Ontarians don't follow their politics very closely. So being able to play on these kind of very close cultural issues about, whether you identify with him or you identify, with these urban elites, it may be quite effective in terms of convincing people to turn out to vote for him again.
Peter, thank you. Peter Graefe is an associate professor of political science at McMaster University.